Friends, last week we completed our study of the gross body. In 20 verses, from 72 to 91, in 20 verses, Sri Shankaracharya has analyzed and explained the Sthula Sharira. From our present point of view, this physical body happens to be the most important factor of our human personality. Because this is what is most obvious to us. We don't know anything beyond this. However, in addition to this physical body, Vedanta says we have two more bodies, the subtle and the causal. They are invisible, but though they are invisible, they are in fact more powerful. Our behavior is influenced much more by them than by the gross body. And these three bodies together make up our psychophysical constitution. The physical body is the outermost, and the causal body is the innermost, and the subtle body is in between them. As we saw, it is through the physical body that we contact the external world. Our daily experience is threefold: waking, dreaming, and dreamless sleep. And these three bodies serve respectively as mediums of that threefold experience. The physical body is composed of the same gross elements as the sensible universe. And so it is perceptible by the sense organs, and that is why it is called the gross body, Sthula Sharira. But though it is tangible, it is far less durable than the two others. Now, as we heard last week, the physical body is our temporary residence. It is the base for all our waking experience. It is so predominant in our consciousness that for all practical purposes we think it is the only body we have, and we ignore the other two because they can't be perceived by the sense organs. But what happens when we die? At death, we leave this gross body and become reincarnated in another gross body. But we retain the same subtle body and the same causal body all along until we finally attain moksha, until we become one with Brahman. But until then, the individual soul, the experiencer within, that soul is identified with the physical body more or less and also experiences the external universe mostly. And that is said to be the soul's waking state. When the soul withdraws from the physical body, like in dream and deep sleep, when the soul withdraws from the physical body, then we lose all contact with the outside world, and we don't even miss it. That is why verse 90 said, "Know this gross body to be like a house to the householder. On that rests the soul's entire dealing with the external world." So, just as the physical body serves as the medium of waking experience, the subtle body serves as the medium of dream experience, and the causal body as the medium of dreamless sleep experience. Today, Shankaracharya will begin to explain the subtle body or the Sukshma Sharira. This will be the second of his three-part answer to the question of what is the not self, what is anatma. The first part dealt with the gross body, and this second part will deal with the subtle body. It is 16 verses long, from 92 to 107. But before we take up the verses, I'd like to give you a summary of what we are going to learn. As I said, the physical body is composed of the same 5 gross elements as the physical universe, and so it is perceptible by the sense organs. But the subtle body is not like that. It is made up of 5 subtle elements in their rudimentary, basic, uncompounded state. So naturally, the subtle body is too fine to be discerned, which is why it is called Sukshma Sharira in the first place. Sukshma means something which cannot be perceived by our sense organs. Shankaracharya says this Sukshma Sharira has 19 component parts. 19. The 5 organs of knowledge, the 5 organs of action, the 5 pranas, the manas, buddhi, chitta and ahankara. They are all formed from the rudimentary elements before panchikarana, before they mix with one another to produce gross elements. And this subtle body is the means of the jiva, the individual soul's experience, that is, experience of the results of its karma. As we already heard last week, the 10 organs that are located in the physical body, these 10 organs are not the real organs. They are the outstations, extensions of the real organs that belong to the subtle body. The 5 visible sense organs, I mean the ears, the skin, the eyes, the tongue and the nose. These 5 visible external sense organs, they derive their powers from their counterparts in the subtle body. What are those powers? The powers of hearing, touch, sight, taste and smell. In the same way, the 5 visible motor organs, organs of action, the tongue, the hands, the feet, the anus and the sex organs. These organs of action, they derive their powers also from their counterparts in the subtle body. The powers of speech, the powers of grasping, walking, evacuation and procreation. Then we have the 5 pranas. They are the 5 phases of one and the same vital energy. The one and the same vital energy has 5 different names: prana, apana, vyana, udana and samana, according to its 5 different functions. Prana is the life force that is felt as breath in the nose. Apana moves downwards and expels unassimilated food and drink. Vyana moves in all directions and pervades the entire body. Udana rises up, sometimes causing vomiting, and also helps the soul pass out of the body at the time of death. And Samana helps in digesting food and drink and in converting them into various materials of the body. In fact, this body heat, The body heat which is generated by prana remains in the body as long as life is there. It belongs to the subtle body, not to the gross body. And that body heat is maintained by Udana. Udana functions until the last. And it is this Udana that conducts the soul when it leaves the body, the gross body. When Udana leaves, then the body loses all heat. Then life has definitely left the gross body. So all these are manifestations of prana. That is the third component of the subtle body. Then finally we have the mind. The mind is technically called the inner instrument, antahkarana. And this inner instrument has 4 distinct phases according to its 4 different functions: deliberation, determination, recollection, and the I sense. These are all technical terms in Vedanta. Roughly speaking, deliberation means thinking about a thing that is perceived. Determination is ascertaining what that thing is. Recollection is memory, relating an object that is perceived now with the impression of a similar object that was perceived sometime earlier. And the I sense is the ego, or the sense of self. We'll be learning more about them a little later. For now, it is enough to know this much. All these 19 components are the products of the 5 subtle, rudimentary elements, and they all belong to the subtle body. And because they are made of the rudimentary elements, the subtle body is extremely fine, extremely durable. It is not destroyed when the gross body is destroyed. At death, only the gross body is left behind, and the individual soul, the Jivatma, moves out clothed in the subtle body. So it is the subtle body that carries the Jiva in its migration to other worlds. It lasts very long until the soul attains final liberation. That means the subtle body endures as long as the soul finds itself in samsara. And throughout this period, it is only the gross body that is changed according to the result of the soul's karma. But the same subtle body persists. So, the sense organs, pranas, and the mind all belong to the subtle body. And the subtle body is the storehouse of all the subtle forces generated by them. Whatever capacities, whatever tendencies, good or evil, all that a person acquires, they all remain in the subtle body as potencies. As potencies, because the impressions left on the mind by our actions, perceptions, thoughts, feelings, desires, they are all accumulated there in latent form, all these impressions. With all these contents, the subtle body moves with the soul when the soul passes out of the gross body. At that time, when the soul has left the body, these subtle forces become strong and determine the person's journey hereafter. And when some of these need bodies, when some of those karmas need bodies to work themselves out, the person is reborn with those capacities, with those abilities. So, the psychophysical constitution of every individual is shaped primarily by the subtle forces carried by the subtle body from the previous incarnation or incarnations. Sometimes the subtle body, the Sukshma Sharira, is also called Linga Sharira or index body. The word Linga is significant. It means a mark or sign. So the Linga Sharira is a sign of what? What does it indicate? What does it point to? It's a mark of the jivas, the soul's past. It is a mark of the soul's past and also a sign of its future. That is what an index means. If certain people seem to be born with special capacities, physical, intellectual, aesthetic, or spiritual, whatever, if they appear to be born with special capacities, it is because they cultivated those powers in their previous life or lives and did not lose them at death. So they belong to the subtle body, and the subtle body carries them over beyond death. Wrong tendencies, faults of character, they are also carried over in the same way. So, this is what the subtle body is. Then Shankaracharya says, this subtle body is the seat of dream experience. In the waking state, the experiencer dwells especially on the physical body, and in the dream state, especially on the subtle body. When a person falls asleep and dreams, their consciousness withdraws itself from the gross body to the subtle body. But please remember, all the impressions that are gathered from extensive waking experience, they are all stored in the subtle body. And out of this vast inner store of impressions, the experiencer creates dream images. So it is as if the dreamer concretizes certain impressions and enjoys them in dreams. But whether waking or dream, the jiva, the soul, it doesn't experience those states by itself. It is in association with the mind. It is in association with the mind that the soul functions as the experiencer. The mind is the main component of the subtle body. In the waking state, the external world is experienced through the external sense organs and the mind. The mind is active also in the waking state, of course. In the dream state, the mind becomes the sole instrument of experience because consciousness has receded from the sense organs. That is the difference. In the waking state, both the sense organs and the mind. In the dream state, only the mind without the sense organs. Anyhow, all this we will learn in more detail in the following 16 verses, 92 to 107. First of all, the organs of knowledge and action. Buddhindriyani shravanam tvagakshi ghrananchati jihva vishayavabodhanat vakpanipada gudama pyupastha karmendriyani pravanena karmasu. Buddhindriyani shravanam tvagakshi ghranancha jihva vishayavabodhanat vakpanipada gudama pyupastha karmendriyani pravanena karmasu. The ears, skin, eyes, nose and tongue, they are organs of knowledge. Why? For they give knowledge of objects. The vocal organs, hands, legs, and the organs of excretion and reproduction, they are organs of action because they lead to action. This we have already heard more than once. The 5 sense organs and the 5 motor organs. So we are familiar with this list of 10 organs. But what we need to understand correctly is the word buddhi indriyani. Here, buddhi simply means jnana or knowledge. So, buddhindriya means organ of knowledge, organ of perception. Please don't confuse it with the buddhi, that is one of the 4 phases of the mind. That buddhi is something entirely different. The easiest way to avoid misunderstanding is simply by substituting buddhindriyani with jnanendriyani. If we do that, then the verse would read, Jnanendriyani Shravanam Tvagakshi, and there would be no confusion. Anyway, it's a minor thing. We only have to be a little careful, that's all. Now, why are the buddhi indriyas or the jnanendriyas so called? Vishaya avabodhanat, because they reveal sense objects. Through them, we cognize, we come to know of objects. That is why they are called organs of knowledge. And why are the karmendriyas so called? Pravanena karmasu, because of their tendency to action. They lead to or involve us in action. That is why they are called organs of action. So the organs of knowledge and the organs of action both together make our two-way interaction with the external world possible. Through the jnanendriyas, we receive stimuli from the outside world, and through the karmendriyas, we respond to them. But what is important to remember is that the 10 organs located in the physical body are not the real organs. This we have to remember. They are only the outposts of the real organs that belong to the subtle body. The 5 external jnanendriyas, 5 external jnanendriyas, the ears, the skin, the eyes, the tongue, and the nose. They derive their powers, the powers of hearing, touch, sight, taste, and smell, as I said, from their counterparts in the subtle body. And the 5 external karmendriyas, the tongue, the hands, the feet, the anus, and the sex organs, they derive their powers, that is, the powers of speech, grasping, walking, excretion, reproduction. These powers, they derive from their counterparts in the subtle body. But what exactly are these counterparts in the subtle body? They are not organs as such. They are not organs in the sense we understand the word. The subtle body itself is so fine that it is invisible. So these so-called subtle counterparts are functional abilities. They are capacities. This is something we need to clearly understand and keep in mind. The subtle counterparts means functional abilities or capacities. The real indriyas refer to abilities, capacities of cognition and action. In fact, that is what the word indriya literally means. Indriya means power of the senses or the faculty of sense. They don't mean an organ as such. They're auf Deutsch Vermögen oder Fähigkeiten. So, buddhi indriyani shravanam tvagakshe ghranancha jihva vishayavabodhanat Vakpanipada gudamapyupastha karmendriyani pravanena karmasu. The ears, the skin, eyes, nose and tongue are organs of knowledge, for they give knowledge of objects. The vocal organs, hands, legs and the organs of excretion and reproduction are organs of action, for they lead to action. Then, after the 10 sense organs comes the mind, technically called the inner instrument. The mind is the leader of the sense organs. It is in charge of the jnanendriyas and karmendriyas, and through them it deals with the external objects. Without being directed by the mind, none of the sense organs can operate. Either for perception or for action, the light of consciousness is necessary, and it is the mind that conveys this light of consciousness to the sense organs so that they can function. The organs are inert by nature. They can't operate by themselves. They have to be driven by the mind, which bears the light of consciousness, that it itself in turn borrows from the self, from the Atman. That is one half of the story. On the other hand, the mind also cannot deal with the physical objects independently of the organs. The mind has no direct contact with external things. It can only reach them through the organs of perception and action. And as we saw, these 10 sense organs function through their counterparts, outposts in the physical body. That is why these 10 outer organs are called bahirindriyas, external organs, or bahyakaranas, external instruments. And as distinct from them, the mind is called the antarindriya or antahkarana, internal organ or internal instrument. So, without the mind, the sense organs can't operate, and without the sense organs, the mind cannot deal with the outside world. That is why their mutual association is indispensable for any kind of perception or action. It is only in conjunction with each other that they can function or operate. I am saying all this because in the following verse, Shankaracharya refers to the mind as the inner organ. Nigadyatentah karanam manodhir ahankritish chittamiti svavrittibhi manastu sankalpa vikalpanadibhir buddhi padarthadhyavasaya dharmatah. Nigadyatentah karanam manodhir ahankritish chittamiti svavrittibhi manastu sankalpa vikalpanadibhi buddhi padarthadhyavasaya dharmatah. Then atrabhimanad ahamityahankritihi swarthanusandhana gunena chittam. Atrabhimanad ahamityahankritihi swarthanusandhana gunena chittam. The inner organ, antahkarana, is called manas, buddhi, ahankara or chitta according to their respective functions. Manas, from its considering the pros and cons of a thing. Buddhi, from its property of determining the real nature of the object. Ahankara, ego, from its identification with this body as one's own self. And chitta, from its function of remembering things that it has experienced. Now, nigadyate antahkaranam, the inner organ is called what? What is the inner organ called? Mana, dhi, ahankriti, chittam. Mind, intellect, ego, and memory. But how come one and the same internal organ has 4 different names? Svavrittibhi, according to its 4 functions. So what are those 4 functions? First, manas. Manastu sankalpa vikalpanadibhi, the function of the inner organ as the mind. Or to say it plainly, the function of the mind. The function of the mind is to consider, in a general way, the various aspects of an object. To form a conception, a notion, to have an idea of that object in an indeterminate way. Indeterminate means not identified exactly, unbestimmt. That is what the mind is. The mind is always varying, alternating between certainty and uncertainty. That is what is technically called considering the pros and cons of a certain thing or a situation. That is the function of the mind. Next, buddhi padarthadhyavasaya dharmatah, the function of the same inner organ as the intellect. That is to say, the function of the intellect is to determine the real nature of the object, to ascertain what exactly the perceived object is. With the help of the buddhi, the intellect, doubt is resolved and one comes to a definite conclusion regarding the nature of an object. Third is swarthanusandhana gunena chittam, the function of the same inner organ as memory. That is, the function of memory is recollection, retrieval of one's own past experiences. Naturally, it also includes remembering of thoughts, feelings, and emotions that are connected with those personal experiences. Everything is included. Chitta or memory is where all that is stored. So chitta means both storage and retrieval. And lastly, atrabhimanat ahamityahankritihi, the function of the same inner organ as the ego, or the function of the ego is to identify the self with this body. Or to put it slightly differently, ego is the self-consciousness that arises when the inner organ, when the antahkarana identifies itself with the body. Let me try to explain all this in a simple way with a practical example. We know that the mind, the inner organ, antahkarana to be precise, we know the inner organ has innumerable modes and functions. According to Vedanta, among all the various functions of the antahkarana, cognition is basic. Cognition means the process by which knowledge and understanding is developed in the mind. I repeat, cognition is the process by which knowledge and understanding is developed in the mind. This is the basic function. This basic function of cognition underlies all other functions. No mental function is possible without any knowledge of the object concerned. Just think about it. I can't think or feel or will. I can't like or dislike. I can't believe or disbelieve without first knowing an object. So, cognition is absolutely fundamental. And Vedanta says this cognition itself is fourfold. It happens very quickly, so we are not always able to distinguish the four stages of cognition. In Vedanta books, you find this example. It is like piercing a bundle of 100 sheets of paper with a sharp object. If we do it with enough force, the act of piercing appears to be so fast that all the 100 sheets of paper are pierced at the same time. But it is not like that. There is a sequence. They are pierced one after another. But because the process is so quick, we think that it all happens at once. So, this cognition is fourfold. It involves deliberation, that is Überlegung, determination, Bestimmung, recollection, Erinnerung, and egoism or I-sense. Egoismus oder Ich-Sinn. Now, when we see an object, say a chair, we don't know it all at once. At first, we have a vague idea of it. As we see the object, we think, what is it? What is it? Is it this or something else? This kind of indefinite thinking is called deliberation, Überlegung. And this is the function of manas, the mind. Then we search inside for the impression of a similar object with which this object can be related. We search inside for an impression of a similar object with which this present object can be related. This kind of search is called recollection, Erinnerung. And this is the function of chitta, memory. This leads to the recognition of the object as a chair, because I've seen a chair earlier. Then we ascertain, feststellen, this is a chair. This kind of ascertainment is known as determination, Bestimmung. And this is the function of buddhi, intellect. Buddhi is decisive. Finally, with the ascertainment, when I have this certain knowledge, this is a chair, the knowledge, the awareness, I know the chair, that arises. This is what is called the I sense, Ich-Sinn. And this is the function of the ego. The function of the ahankara is closely related with the buddhi. I know that this is a chair. So it is clear from this illustration that cognition is actually a form of recognition. In order to know something new, I have to relate it to something already known to me. And this fourfold cognition together represents the inner organ, antahkarana, which is generally called the mind. All other mental functions that I mentioned just now, thinking, feeling, willing, liking, disliking, believing, doubting, they all rest on this basic function of cognition, more or less. So, for one last time, the four functions of the antahkarana, or the four modes of cognition, are manas, deliberation, chitta, recollection, buddhi, determination, and ahankara, egoism. So, nigadyate intah karanam manodhir ahankritischittamiti svavrittibhi manastu sankalpa vikalpanadibhir buddhi padarthadhyavasaya dharmatah atrabhimanad ahamityahangkritih swarthanusandhana gunena chittam. The inner organ, antahkarana, is called manas, buddhi, ahankara or chitta according to their respective functions. Manas, from its considering the pros and cons of a thing. Buddhi, from its property of determining the real nature of objects. Ahankara or ego, from its identification with this body as one's own self. And chitta, from its function of remembering things it has already experienced. Now, after the 10 sense organs and the fourfold mental organ, after the indriyas and the antahkarana, we come to the last remaining constituent of the subtle body, prana, or the vital force. Prana is the life principle that distinguishes the living from the non-living. This is what animates, enlivens the body-mind complex of a living being. It is neither physical nor mental. That is why it is technically called vital. It is of its own kind. It is not derived from the body or the mind, nor is it dependent on them. But it is vital to their existence. That is, the body and mind are dependent on prana for their existence and functioning. None of the 10 sense organs gives life to the body, nor does the mind. As we saw, they all have their specific functions. So it is prana that gives life. Prana is life. I may lose one or more of my organs. I may lose my power of hearing, my power of speech, or my power of sight. But that doesn't mean I lose my life or that I lose my liveliness. My mental powers may diminish someday, they may become weak, but that may not necessarily reduce my vigor and vitality. That cannot be said. In animals and plants, there is very little manifestation of mental powers, but they are full of vigor and vitality. That is all due to the power of prana. Then, during deep sleep, when the sense organs and the mind stop functioning, the vital processes continue. I continue to live even when the mind has gone to sleep. My respiration becomes slower, my heartbeat becomes softer, but they don't stop. Also, digestion and absorption of food, that also continues. How? Because prana keeps functioning. This is what prana is. This is the life principle. Now, just like the mind, the one and the same prana also has 5 different names according to its 5 different functions. That is what verse 95 says. Pranapana Vyana Samana bhavatyasau pranah swayameva vritti bhedat vikriti bhedat suvarna saliladivat. This verse is not set to meter. It sounds like prose. Pranapana Vyana Samana bhavatyasau pranah swayameva vritti bhedat vikriti bhedat suvarna saliladivat. one and the same prana, vital force, becomes prana, apana, vyana, udana, and samana according to their diversity of functions and modifications, like gold, water, and the like. So the term prana is used to mean the life principle operating in the body as a whole. It can be used in two senses. The life principle operating in the body as a whole, or in any one of its 5 specific functions. In the second sense, in the specific sense, prana is the life principle that operates in the region of the heart, in the lungs and the heart. Because it is responsible for respiration, it is called breath. It tends to move upward towards the mouth and the nostrils. And this happens to be the main vital force. That is why it is called, breath is called mukhya prana. When this prana functions, the others also function. Then second is apana, or downward breath. This apana functions below the heart and down to the navel. From the heart to the navel. It helps elimination, excretion. Third is Vyana. Vyana is called diffused breath because it is present throughout the body. It pervades the whole body, holding together all its parts, resisting the body's disintegration. So this is the work of prana. Otherwise, this organism would have fallen apart. But this Vyana is also responsible for blood circulation and for carrying nutrition throughout the body. So this is Vyana. Fourth is Udana. Udana means upward breath. It is located in the throat, but its function is from the feet right up to the head. And Udana is said to promote growth of the body. But it also causes vomiting and burping. Erbrechen und Aufstoßen. And Udana is also responsible, this we already heard, it is responsible for conducting the soul as it passes out of the body at the time of death. And the last is Samana, distributive breath. This Samana is located in the stomach, so it governs the process of digestion and assimilation. So, to recapitulate, prana controls the breath, apana carries downward assimilated food and drink, Vyana pervades the entire body and holds it together, Udana ejects the contents of the stomach through the mouth and conducts the soul from the body at the time of death, and Samana digests, assimilates food and drink. So it is all one and the same vital energy having 5 modifications according to its 5 different functions. Asau pranaha swayameva, all these bhavati. Asau pranaha swayameva bhavati. This one vital energy itself becomes all these. How? Vritti bhedat, according to its different functions. Vritti means function. And vikriti bhedat. Vikriti means modification. Vikriti Bheda means according to its modifications. Suvarna Saliladivat. Shankaracharya gives an analogy. Just as gold is known by different names when it is fashioned into various ornaments, or just as water takes the form of waves, foam, bubbles, as water or gold, it is one. But in their different forms, in their different functions, they are many. So, Pranapana Vyano Samana Bhavatyasa Upranaha Swayameva Vritti Bhedad Vikriti Bhedad Suvarna Saliladivat. One and the same vital force becomes Prana, Apana, Vyana, Udana and Samana according to their diversity of functions and modifications, like gold and water. So now we have heard a comprehensive, is umfassend, comprehensive account of the subtle body with all its 19 component parts. The 5 organs of perception, the 5 organs of action, the 4 modes of the inner instrument of the mind, and the 5 forms and functions of the vital energy, prana. As you can see, these 19 parts come under 4 groups. Sense organs, the sense organs, the motor organs, the mind, and the vital energy. But what are these components themselves made of? They make up the subtle body, but what are the components themselves made of? And more importantly, what are the characteristics of the individual soul who dwells in this subtle body, who is limited by it? Shankaracharya's answer to these 2 questions adds 4 more factors to the subtle body. This we will see in the following verse. Verse 96. Vagadi pancha, Shravanadi pancha, Pranadi pancha, Abhramukhani pancha, Buddhyadyavidyapicha kama karmani, Puryashtakam Sukshma Sharira Mahuhu. Vagadi pancha, Shravanadi pancha, Pranadi pancha, Abhramukhani pancha, Buddhyadyavidyapicha kama karmani, Puryashtakam Sukshma Sharira Mahuhu. The 5 organs of action beginning with speech, the 5 organs of knowledge beginning with the ear, the 5 vital energies beginning with prana, the 5 subtle elements beginning with space, the inner organ consisting of buddhi and the rest. All these, together with ignorance, desire and action, these 8 cities, Shankaracharya uses a special word. These 8 cities make up what is called the subtle body. So the subtle body, on the whole, it is a product, it is produced from the 5 subtle elements, the Sukshma Bhutas in their original, uncompounded state. But what are its individual components made of, specifically? To answer this, we have to go one step backward. Where do the subtle elements themselves come from? They come from Prakriti, from primordial nature. And what is Prakriti made of? Prakriti is made of the 3 gunas: Sattva, luminosity; Rajas, activity; and Tamas, inertia. This you know. So whatever is a product of Prakriti is also characterized by these three gunas. And that includes the five elements and all the bodies, gross or fine, that are made of those five elements. Gross bodies are produced from the gross compounded elements. This we learnt in our last class. They are dull and inert in themselves. But subtle bodies are produced from the subtle, uncompounded elements. And their components are by nature active or luminous. The karmendriyas and prana are active by nature. Pravanena karmasu, they lead to action. And the jnanendriyas and antahkarana, they are luminous by nature. How? Vishayava bodhanat, they reveal objects. So now we can take them up individually. I'll try to be as precise as possible. First of all, the five subtle, invisible organs of action. Mind you, these real organs are subtle and invisible. So, the five subtle, invisible organs of action, karmendriyas, the organ of speech, vak, it is produced from the rajas particles of the element space, akasha. This is as precise as it can get. The organ of grasping, the hands, pani, is produced from the rajas particles of the element air, vayu. The organ of walking, the feet, pada, is produced from the rajas particles of the element air, fire, agni. The organ of evacuation, payu, is produced again from the rajas particles of the element water, apa. And the organ of generation, upastha, is produced from the rajas particles of the element earth. Everything, all these are produced from the rajas particles. That is why they are active. These are five active components of the subtle body. The remaining active component is, if you remember, there is one more remaining active component, and that is the vital energy, prana. Prana is said to be produced from a combination, the combination of the rajas particles of all five subtle elements. In the same way, the five subtle, invisible organs of knowledge, the jnanendriyas, the organ of hearing, the ear, shrotra, is produced from the sattva particles of the element space, akasha. The organ of touch, skin or tvak, is produced from the sattva particles of air or vayu. The organ of sight, eye or chakshu, is produced from the sattva particles of the element fire or agni. The organ of taste, the tongue, jihva, is produced from the sattva particles of the element water, apa. And the organ of smell, the nose, grana, is produced from the sattva particles of the element earth, prithvi. So these are the five luminous components of the subtle body. And what is the remaining luminous component? The inner organ, antahkarana. And that is said to be produced from a combination of the sattva particles of all five subtle elements. I hope it is all clear. Now, to these five groups, the five subtle elements, the five organs of action, the 5 organs of knowledge, the 5 vital energies, and the 4 modes of the internal organ. To these 5 groups, Shankaracharya adds 3 more factors that are of great significance to us. Great significance to us as individual souls, as Jivatmas. That we will take up next week. They are avidya, kama, and karma. Primordial ignorance, desire, and action. So, that is all for today. I hope it wasn't all too much, but I've repeated things again and again so that it stays in the mind. Thank you.